Hello and happy Friday. Welcome to the Frog Factor podcast. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. We're going to talk Josh Hoover, Heisman candidate today. Yeah, it's getting thrown out there by at least somebody. So we'll break that down. Game against ACU, have some early thoughts about that, but really more about the Big 12 this weekend. And also, we'll answer the question one more time. How impressive was that win against North Carolina? How good is this team? We'll get into all that here on the Frog Factor podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll have episodes here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We start with Josh Hoover. His final line on Monday night, 27 of 36, 284 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I thought he had some impressive plays. That fade pattern to Jordan Dwyer, the first touchdown of the season for TCU, that was a really impressive throw. Stood in the pocket, made a confident throw. Had a throw in the end zone to Chase Curtis that Chase either dropped or it got broken up by the linebacker. I'd have to go back and look at it again, but he was on the move and made a really good throw. Had a pass along the sidelines to Jordan Dwyer when, again, he was on the move and made a nice play, just zipped it in there, thread the needle to find Dwyer, who was super impressive, by the way, in game one. Jordan was one of the biggest pluses and just bright spots of that game one performance, of which there were many in that 48-14 win. But I thought Josh was very confident. I thought he played extremely well. Had the 1 interception on the screen pass. It was a bad throw. I also, like many of you, didn't love that call on 3rd and 4, screen pass to Jordan Bailey. But, it happens from time to time. They shook that off. Bud Clark got the pick 6 a few plays later. So ultimately it didn't matter. But it was a turnover in plus territory. That was really the only mistake I can think of. He was very efficient. My friend Harrison Graham mentioned on social media during the game, he just looked in control. Like he was doing a lot of things pre-snap. He looked like he knew what he was about, what his decisions were going to be. And you would think year 3 in the system, that would make sense. And so I've been consuming a lot of media reaction to this win because it was a standalone game on a Monday night. And as you would expect, most of it has centered around North Carolina losing and Bill Belichick and his team looking horrible in his debut. I watched Get Up the morning after the ball game with Mike Greenberg and that crew, and it was all about Bill Belichick and does this mean he's going to leave the team and get fired or whatever. But a couple of things that I noticed yesterday. CBS Sports, they do college football quarterback rankings each and every week. And the writer of this piece, who is David Cobb at CBS Sports, he gives the qualifier at the beginning of the article. He says, this is not like a Heisman straw poll. This is not NFL draft projections. It's simply just based on the competition they played, based on the numbers, who was the most impressive player or most impressive quarterback in week 1. He named Josh Hoover as his number 1 QB. Garrett Nussmeier was number 2, who had a fairly pedestrian game against Clemson, but it was a win against Clemson, right? Like that's a big deal. Drew Aller at Penn State was 3, had a very good game against Nevada. Penn State had no trouble. Tommy Castellanos at Florida State was 4. Julian Sam was 5. I won't run down the entire list, but you get the picture. He had Josh Hoover at number 1. Which surprised me a little bit because I thought Josh played well. Maybe it's just because I watch him week in and week out, and you guys possibly have the same perspective. I thought he was effective. I thought he did a good job. I wasn't just blown away by his performance, and it's not because I didn't think he was good. I just feel like a lot of what he showed on Monday were things that we had seen from Josh Hoover in the past. He performed about like I expected. Slightly better, but he showed some things that I'll get to in a minute that caught my eye as far as taking a step forward this year. But by and large, he was who I thought he would be. And I happened to come across this YouTube video of Unsportsmanlike, which is ESPN Radio's morning show now. It's Evan Cohen, Chris Canty, former Cowboys, Giants, defensive lineman, and Michelle Smallman. I don't listen to Unsportsmanlike a lot, but they did a segment on Tuesday about the game. And I was surprised to hear them talk a lot about TCU. Yes, they covered North Carolina at length, but they also talked about it, how impressive TCU was. And Chris Canty said he thought Josh Hoover was a Heisman candidate after that performance on Monday night. And he mentioned it was a cool story because they talked about during the broadcast, Josh got offered money from Tennessee to leave and transfer this offseason. He didn't take that. There are rumors there were other SEC schools that were poking around or reaching out over the past few off seasons and have been like, hey, what would it take to get you to come play quarterback for us? And Josh has been fiercely loyal to TCU. He's also getting paid well at TCU, but he's been very loyal to the Horned Frogs program. This is where he wants to be. And he mentioned that just to say, like, he's rooting for Josh because of that story and because of his loyalty to the program. But he was definitive about it. He said this is a Heisman candidate, which I was pleasantly surprised to hear him say that. Evan Cohen followed up on that and said, I think this is a first round NFL guy. Now, I don't know about that. And Canty sort of backed off that too. He's like, I'm not sure about that either. But Cohen was impressed with him as well. They both had great things to say about Josh Hoover and who he is. And it just sort of reminded me, and this is a good thing for TCU in this present moment. And it's also a sad thing about college football in general. The national media doesn't watch a lot of college football. They don't. Now, there are people at ESPN, like Paul Feinbaum is a national media person, but he watches college football. It might be mainly SEC football, but he is at games on a weekly basis, right? Josh Pate, national name, national brand. He's about college football. You go down the list. Joel Klatt at Fox. You get what I'm saying. But there are a number of national personalities like Mike Greenberg, who I really like at ESPN. And I've been a fan of his throughout his career. He's at Get Up now. I don't think Mike Greenberg watches a lot of college football games. I doubt he knew about Josh Hoover before that ball game. The way that Chris Canty and Evan Cohen and Michelle Smallman were talking about Josh Hoover after the game, I don't think they knew who he was before the ball game. And it was a reminder to me of just how important it is to be on the national stage when it comes to the perception of your program and these individual awards, which don't mean as much in the long run to us as fans. But I mean, winning a Heisman Trophy, a TCU player winning a Heisman Trophy would be amazing. But obviously, as fans, we're more concerned with the team's success, right? They saw one game. They saw 3 hours of Josh Hoover on Monday night. He threw for almost 4,000 yards last year, and they're like, all right, there you go. Dark horse Heisman candidate, which I love that that's popping up. And when I first heard it, I was sort of like, I mean, I love Josh. I think if TCU plays really well and they're in the playoff, he should be in the conversation. But I was sort of skeptical. But, you look at the numbers. Look at some of the other quarterbacks that were listed along with Josh Hoover in this top 10 quarterback list in college football by CBS Sports. Garrett Nussmeier, 28 of 38, 230 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. Now, that was against Clemson, right? Good team. But didn't exactly set the world on fire. However, LSU won. That means a lot. Tommy Castellanos, maybe the biggest winner of the weekend with the win over Bama at Florida State. 9 of 14 for 152 yards passing, but he did have 78 yards rushing on 16 carries. He's going to be a big part of their running game all year long. Lenora Sellers at South Carolina, 12 of 19, 209 yards passing, 1 touchdown, no picks. Had 25 yards rushing on 13 attempts. He will be a big part of their running game, though, throughout the season. Last year, he ran for almost 700 yards. My point is, Josh Hoover stacks up with those guys. Now, is North Carolina good? TBD. They certainly didn't look good on Monday night. But he was right there with some of the best quarterbacks in the nation. And while right now it does feel like kind of a stretch, if TCU keeps winning and he keeps playing like that, he will be in the Heisman conversation. That's not a hypothetical to me. That's just a fact. And it's important that they stay on the national stage. Now, how many more of those games are they going to get? Standalone games? I don't know. maybe 0. But you play SMU in a couple weeks, which more than likely will be a ranked team. I guess if they just get completely waxed by Baylor, that could change. But there's a good chance that the Ponies will be ranked when you play them. You have games against, I don't know how good these teams are going to be. I know Arizona State's a good team. You play them on a Friday night soon. You get BYU on the road. You get Iowa State at home. Iowa State looks really good right now. Kansas State on the road later on. My point is, there's opportunities this year for him to show out and make plays and make things happen. And I'm excited to watch him do that, hopefully, on the national stage. But I was super impressed with how he played on Monday. And I think his presence and confidence, it spread throughout the team because you saw a team on Monday. And I believe the coaching staff gets credit for this too. But you saw a team on Monday night that didn't get shook up by that opening touchdown drive. They didn't get lost in the lights and all the hoopla. Michelle Smallman on Unsportsmanlike was like, yeah, that was a lot of pomp and circumstance to go out there and get drilled by TCU. Well, who brought the pomp and circumstance? Like, you work for ESPN. I mean, I'm happy that you guys covered it so closely because it was a great atmosphere and a great opportunity for TCU to show out on national stage. But ESPN were the ones that spent 2 hours of the pregame show pretty much exclusively talking about Bill Belichick, having 3 of the 4 panelists at the desk pick him to win the ball game. And yeah, Michael Jordan was there. Lawrence Taylor was there. It was a sellout crowd. But the TV spectacle was brought in by ESPN. And it's their fault that they didn't consider how good of a team TCU could be before that ball game. And that bled into the broadcast and led to a huge win for the Frogs. And Sonny said afterwards they felt disrespected and they wanted to go out there and prove what they could do. But individually, Josh Hoover played really well. And he played well enough in that moment that he's catching the attention of national pundits. And hopefully what that means is, at the very least, those people will be circling back to check box scores on a weekly basis and say, okay, he played well again. Another box checked. Let's see what he does throughout the season. And that when those big games come later on, he can perform well. Speaking of big games and how good this team is, that's what we'll talk about next here on Locked On Horned Frog. Oh, my goodness. Here on the Frog Factor podcast. So there were a lot of YouTube comments on Wednesday's episode, which I appreciate. I love hearing from you guys. Please feel free to chime in anytime you want. But one of them was from my friend Matt, not Matt Jennings, but Matt Clark. He said, I like your optimism, Steven. While I really like what I saw, I'm very concerned that UNC is just light speed bad. So many of their players were consistently out of position. They made a lot of mental mistakes, and everything about them seemed like they were a very poorly coached team without a lot of talent. I hope you're right and I'm wrong. Well, my response to that would be, I agree with you. I think North Carolina is not a very good team right now. I don't know what's going to happen with them moving forward, obviously. I do think if Max Johnson becomes their quarterback, that could help them out, at least in the short term, because of what he can do in the passing game. But UNC might only end up winning 3 games. I think that's a very real possibility based on what we saw Monday night. And you're right. It wasn't so much the talent discrepancy that stood out to me. It was just the fact that they looked poorly coached. As you said, they turned the ball over multiple times. There were mental mistakes. Now, Kirk Herbstreit, I thought, made a good point during the second half where he was like, look, there's 70 new players on this team. And you have to wonder, when you get down 27-7, which I believe was the score when he started to make this point, who steps up? I mean, there's nobody on that sideline that really has pedigree and has the experience within that program to say, hey, let's Let's keep fighting. Let's keep playing hard. And I believe TCU was a much better team on Monday, but I think the reason that one got so out of hand was because North Carolina got behind by 2 or 3 touchdowns and they just didn't have an answer for it. That was not a group, as he said, that had a lot of leadership or that had a senior or junior that had been around to lean on to say, hey, let's keep fighting here. And they didn't bring a lot of fight to that ball game. The reason I was impressed with TCU, that was not a close football game. They played really well. The first drive, okay, you're adjusting to something you didn't expect or didn't see. But after that, the defense looked good. I thought they were fast. I thought they were physical. One turnover on Monday night. That stinks. But other than that, they played a pretty clean football game. There weren't a lot of penalties. This was not a 30-15 win. Well, that would be a weird score. This was not a 27-14 victory where you left a lot of points on the board and you were very disjointed and you walked away happy that you won, but honestly more just relieved that you survived. That was a Stanford game last year in the season opener. They found a way to win, but they did not dominate the line of scrimmage. They didn't run the ball well. And the biggest takeaway I had after the Stanford game was Jack Bech is really good. I mean, that's a surprise. That's good. Josh Hoover's good, even though he turned the ball over a few times on that night. And I also thought the defense was going to be really good after that ball game, and they went through their struggles, started to turn it around towards the end of the season. But my point is, they played a complete football game against UNC. And so that's why I'm excited. Does it mean they're going to go 10-2 or 12-0? No. You have to factor in the competition. That might be the second worst team they play this year from a talent and execution standpoint. But they handled their business. And that's now 8 of their last 9 games that they've won. And it's also, I said this on Wednesday, they played Arizona and Oklahoma State late last season at home. 2 teams that were on the struggle bus. And it was a similar performance. They got up early. They kept their foot on the gas. They won the game comfortably. That's what good teams do against bad teams. It wasn't playing with your food. It wasn't missing 2 or 3 field goals and keeping North Carolina around. It was complete domination. It was 20-7 at halftime, but they scored 20 unanswered points to get there. And then immediately in the second half, they scored a touchdown. And the things that we said before the year, can they run the ball? Are they going to be able to stop the run? Well, they ran the ball for 250 plus yards on Monday night. And you can say, well, North Carolina's defensive line in front 7 is just bad. Hear me, people. A couple of years ago, this team couldn't run against Nicholls State. They couldn't punch in it against Long Island last year or really do anything effective in the run game until they turned it over to Savion Williams. So it looked different to me on Labor Day. Those counter plays they were running where they were pulling the guards around. Kavorian Barnes was fast. He was running with conviction. But also, there was a hat on a hat. Everybody was blocked. Cade Bennett got that safety or linebacker on the second level and turned him around, and it was off to the races. Eric McAllister sprinting down the sideline, throwing his body in front of a couple defenders to make sure Barnes got the touchdown. That's great effort. Ken Seals throwing a block in the fourth quarter. Nate Palmer sticking his head down and running somebody over on a 4th and 4 late in the ball game. When your reserve players are giving that type of extra effort in a ball game that was out of hand, that's a really good sign, right? So those were the things to me that brought optimism. It wasn't so much that they beat UNC. I expected that. I picked them to win. I picked them to cover. I thought it would be a tougher game. I honestly felt like there was a chance it could be within a touchdown or two just because you didn't know what to expect from North Carolina. Another random thought that I had after that game, and usually we won't talk about the previous game into Friday, but it's a bye week. Does this give you more respect for Deion Sanders? I understand he had the talent, like he had Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter. But the way that North Carolina looks so hapless. I know this is a TCU podcast, but let me know, does it give you more respect for Deion? Because I came away from that debacle on Monday night for North Carolina. Obviously, it was a great thing for TCU. Thinking, man, Deion kind of had this thing figured out. I know Colorado went on to win 4 games, and it was a tough season for them in year 1. But they came into that season opener with their head on straight, and they were ready to play. And to Sonny's credit, he said it multiple times this offseason, and I think it did come to fruition after that first drive. He was like, you know what? We learned from that. We weren't ready, but we took lessons from it. We digested it. Moving forward. So all that to say, the reason I'm optimistic is because of the way that game played out. Not the fact that they just won or the fact that they beat a team that I agree with you. I don't think North Carolina is very good right now. And maybe at the end of the year, we look back and we say, hey, that was a team that ended up winning like 5 or 6 games and TCU caught them at the right time. But whatever their circumstances were, to me, it's more about TCU in the way that they played. And I was encouraged by that. That's what gets me excited about who this team could be moving forward and moving on from here on the Frog Factor podcast. One more question before we shut this thing down for the week. Are you rooting for Baylor or SMU on Saturday? I want to know. In the YouTube comments, you can tweet at me, message me. And I've seen this debate going on via Twitter or X. Baylor and SMU, 11 a.m., Saturday on the CW. SMU won comfortably in their FCS opponent game. Baylor got rocked by Auburn, especially up front. Dave Aranda still looking for answers on defense. I go back and forth on this. I am not – you can disagree with me on this too. I like the Big 12. I'm glad we're in the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is better than people give it credit for. I'm not someone who roots for Big 12 teams when they're playing other conferences that often. Maybe it's just Baylor. But I wasn't losing sleep over Baylor losing to Auburn last Friday night. It made me laugh, right? That's where I was. I think for the sake of TCU, I hope that both teams get a stomach bug that would keep them from playing the entire season. No, you know what I mean. I don't wish good for either of these teams. If I had to choose, I would say it's probably better for the Frogs for SMU to win so that game against SMU in a couple weeks carries a lot of weight. I don't know if TCU would be ranked. I would doubt it because they have the bye week and then they play ACU, so not really an opportunity to impress before that SMU game. But at the very least, final iron skillet game for the foreseeable future in Fort Worth. And I think that'd be a good TV window, and there would be a lot of discussion around those two teams going into that ball game. So that would be my choice. But I'd love to hear from you. Baylor SMU. It's really the only interesting Big 12 game happening this week besides Iowa State. And I'll be tuned into that because I've been impressed by Iowa State. You know, they took down Kansas State in the season opener. They took care of their business against South Dakota last week, and that was a really quick turnaround coming back from Ireland and traveling. But they didn't have much trouble there. So if they take down Iowa, I mean, suddenly you're talking about a team that, hey, watch out for the clones moving forward. We'll be back on Monday. Episodes Monday, Wednesday, Friday leading up to the ACU game and post-game show on Saturday. It's the Frog Factor podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter at SimcockSteven. Thank you guys. Have a good weekend, everybody.